Section 32 of the Arabian Nights Entertainment, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicole. The Arabian Nights Entertainment, Volume 2, by Anonymous, translated by Dr. Jonathan Scott, 1754 to 1829. The Story of Noor ad-Deen and the Fair Persian, Part 2. Shortly after the Vizier Khacan entered, and, being surprised to find his lady and her slaves all in tears, and the fair Persian very melancholy, asked the reason. But instead of answering him, his wife and the slaves continued weeping and lamenting. This astonished him still more. At last, addressing himself to his wife, "I command you," said he, "to let me know the reason of your tears, and to tell me the whole truth." The disconsolate lady could no longer refuse to satisfy her husband. "Sir," said she, "first promise not to use me unkindly, on account of what I shall inform you, since I assure you that what has happened has not been occasioned by any fault of mine." Without waiting for his answer, she then proceeded. "Whilst I was bathing with my women, your son, seizing that fatal opportunity to ruin us both, came hither and made the fair Persian believe that instead of reserving her for the king, you had given her to him as a present. I will not say what he did after such a wicked falsehood, but shall leave you to judge. This is the cause of my affliction on your account and his, for whom I want confidence to implore your pardon." It is impossible to express the Vizier Khacan's distraction at this account of the insolence of his son. "Ah!" cried he, beating his breast and tearing his beard, "miserable son, unworthy of life! Hast thou at last thrown thy father from the highest pinnacle of happiness into a misfortune that must inevitably involve thee also in his ruin? Neither will the king be satisfied with thy blood or mine to avenge the affront offered to his royal person." His lady endeavoured to comfort him. "Afflict yourself no more," said she. "I shall easily raise, with part of my jewels, 10,000 pieces of gold, and you may buy another slave, more beautiful and more worthy of the king." "Ah!" replied the Vizier, "could you think me capable of being so extremely afflicted at losing 10,000 pieces of gold? It is not that loss, nor the loss of all I am worth, for that I should not feel, but the forfeiting my honour, more precious than all the riches in the world, that distresses me." "However," replied the lady, "a loss that can be repaired by money cannot be so very great." "How!" exclaimed the Vizier, "do you not know that Saoni is my mortal enemy, and as soon as this affair comes to his knowledge, do you think he will not exult over me before the king? Your Majesty, will he not say to him, is always talking of Khacan's zeal and affection for your service, but see what a proof he has lately given of his claim to the regard you have hitherto shewn him. He has received 10,000 pieces of gold to buy a slave, and to do him justice, he has most honourably acquitted himself of that commission by purchasing the most beautiful that ever eyes beheld. But instead of bringing her to your Majesty, he has thought it better to make a present of her to his son. 'Here, my son,' said he, 'take this slave, since thou art more worthy of her than the king.' Then, with his usual malice, will he not go on? His son has her now entirely in his possession, and every day revels in her arms without the least disturbance. This, sir, is the exact truth that I have done myself the honour of acquainting you with, and if your Majesty questions my veracity, you may easily satisfy yourself. Do you not plainly see," continued the Vizier, How, upon such a malicious insinuation as this, I am every moment liable to have my house forced by the king's guards, and the fair Persian taken from me, besides 1,000 other misfortunes that will unavoidably follow." "Sir," replied the vizier's lady to her husband, "I am sensible the malice of Saouy is very great, and that, if he have but the least intimation of this affair, he will certainly give it a turn very disadvantageous to your interest. But how is it possible that he or any one else should know what has been privately transacted in your family? Suppose it comes to the king's ears, and he should ask you about it, cannot you say that upon a strict examination you did not deem the slave so fit for his majesty's use as you had at first taught her, that the merchant has cheated you, that indeed she has considerable beauty, but is by no means so accomplished as she had been represented? The king will certainly believe what you say, and Saouy be vexed to the soul to see all his malicious design of ruining you disappointed. Take courage then, and if you will follow my advice, send for all the brokers, tell them you do not like the fair Persian, and order them to be as expeditious as possible in procuring for you another slave." As this advice appeared rational to the vizier Khacan, and as his position began to cool, he resolved to abide by it, but his indignation against his son remained as violent as ever. Noor ad Deen did not make his appearance during the whole of that day, and not daring to hide himself among his young companions, lest his father should search for him in their houses, he went a little way out of town, and took sanctuary in a garden where he had never been before, and where he was totally unknown. He did not return home till it was very late, when he knew his father was in bed, and then his mother's woman, opening the door very softly, admitted him without any noise. He quitted the house again next morning before his father was stirring, and this plan he pursued for a whole month, to his great mortification. Indeed, the woman never flattered him, but told him plainly his father's anger was not at all diminished, and that he protested if he came into his sight he would certainly kill him. The vizier's lady learnt from her women that Noor ad Deen slept every night in the house, but she could not summon resolution to supplicate her husband for his pardon. At last, however, she ventured. One day she said to him, "I have hitherto been silent, sir, not daring to take the liberty of talking to you about your son, but now give me leave to ask you what you design to do with him. It is impossible for a son to have acted more criminally towards a father than he has done, in depriving you of the honour and gratification of presenting to the king a slave so accomplished as the fair Persian. This I acknowledge. But, after all, are you resolved to destroy him, and instead of a light evil no more to be thought of, to draw upon yourself a far greater than perhaps you at present apprehend? Are you not afraid that the malicious world, which inquires after the reason of your son's absconding, may find out the true cause, which you are so desirous of concealing? Should that happen, you would justly fall into a misfortune, which is so much your interest to avoid." "Madam," returned the vizier, "there is much reason in what you have urged, but I cannot think of pardoning our son till I have mortified him as he deserves." "He will be sufficiently mortified," replied the lady, "if you will only do what has just suggested itself to my mind. Your son comes home every night after you have retired. He sleeps here and steals out every morning before you are stirring. Wait for his coming in to-night, make as if you designed to kill him, upon which I will run to his assistance, and when he finds he owes his life entirely to my prayers and entreaties, you may oblige him to take the fair Persian on what condition you please. He loves her, and I am well satisfied the fair slave has no aversion for him." Khacan readily consented to this stratagem. Accordingly, when Noor ad Deen came at the usual hour, before the door was opened, he placed himself behind it, As soon as he entered, he rushed suddenly upon him, and got him down under his feet. Noor ad-Deen, lifting up his head, saw his father with a dagger in his hand, ready to stab him. At that instant his mother arrived, and catching hold of the vizier's arm, cried, "Sir, what are you doing?" "Let me alone," replied the vizier, "that I may kill this base unworthy son." "You shall kill me first," returned the mother. "Never will I suffer you to imbue your hands in your own blood." Noor ad-Deen improved this moment. "My father," cried he with tears in his eyes, "I implore your clemency and compassion, nor must you deny me pardon, since I ask it in his name before whom we must all appear at the last day." Khacan suffered the dagger to be taken out of his hand, and as soon as Noor ad-Deen was released, he threw himself at his father's feet and kissed them, to shew how sincerely he repented of having offended him. "Son," said the vizier, "return thanks to your mother, since it is for her sake I pardon you. I propose also to give you the fair Persian, on condition that you will bind yourself by an oath not to regard her any longer as a slave but as your wife, that you will not sell her nor ever be divorced from her. As she possesses an excellent understanding and abundantly more wit and prudence than yourself, I doubt not but that she will be able to moderate those rash sallies of youth, which are otherwise so likely to effect your ruin." Noor ad-Deen, who little expected such indulgent treatment, returned his father 1,000 thanks, and the fair Persian and he were well pleased with being united to each other. The vizier Khacan, without waiting for the king's inquiries about the succession of the commission he had given him, took particular care to mention the subject often, representing to his majesty the many difficulties he met, and how fearful he was of not acquitting himself to his majesty's satisfaction. In short, he managed the business with so much address that the king insensibly forgot it. Though Saouy had gained some intimation of the transaction, yet Khacan was so much in the king's favour that he was afraid to divulge what he had heard. This delicate affair had now been kept rather more than a year with greater secrecy than the vizier had first expected, when being one day in the bath, and some important business obliging him to leave it, warm as he was, the air, which was then cold, struck to his breast, caused a defluxion to fall upon his lungs, which threw him into a violent fever, and confined him to his bed. His illness increasing every day, and perceiving he had not long to live, he thus addressed himself to his son, who never quitted him during the whole of his illness. "My son," said he, "I know not whether I have well employed the riches heaven has blessed me with, but you see they are not able to save me from the hands of death. The last thing I desire of you with my dying breath is, that you would be mindful of the promise you made me concerning the fair Persian, and in this assurance I shall die content." These were the vizier Khacan's last words. He expired a few moments after, and left his family, the court, and the whole city in great affliction. The king lamented him as a wise, zealous, and faithful minister, and the people bewailed him as their protector and benefactor. Never was there a funeral in Bassorah solemnized with greater pomp and magnificence. The viziers, emirs, and in general all the grandees of the court, strove for the honour of bearing his coffin, one after another, upon their shoulders, to the place of burial, and both rich and poor accompanied him, dissolved in tears. Noor ad-Deen exhibited all the demonstrations of a sorrow proportioned to the loss he had sustained, and long refrained from seeing any company. At last he admitted of a visit from an intimate acquaintance. His friend endeavoured to comfort him, and finding him inclined to hear reason, told him that having paid what was due to the memory of his father, and fully satisfied all that decency required of him, it was now high time to appear again in the world, to converse with his friends, and maintain a character suitable to his birth and talents. For, continued he, though we should sin against the laws both of nature and society, and be thought insensible, if on the death of our fathers we neglected to pay them the duties which filial love imposes upon us, yet having performed these, and put it out of the power of any to reproach us for our conduct, it behoves us to return to the world and our customary occupations. Dry up your tears, then, and resume that wonted air of gaiety which has always inspired with joy those who have had the honour of your friendship. This advice seemed too reasonable to be rejected, and had Noor ad-Deen strictly abided by it, he would certainly have avoided all the misfortunes that afterwards befell him. He entertained his friend honourably, and when he took his leave, desired him to come again the next day, and bring with him 3 or 4 friends of their acquaintance. By this means he insensibly fell into the society of about 10 young men nearly of his own age, with whom he spent his time in continual feasting and entertainments, and scarcely a day passed but he made every one of them some considerable present. The fair Persian, who never approved of his extravagant way of living, often spoke her mind freely. "I question not," said she, "but the vizier your father has left you an ample fortune. But great as it may be not displeased with your slave for telling you that at this rate of living you will quickly see an end of it. We may sometimes indeed treat our friends, and be merry with them, but to make a daily practice of it is certainly the high road to ruin and destruction. For your own honour and reputation, you would do better to follow the footsteps of your deceased father, that in time you may rise to that dignity by which he acquired so much glory and renown." Noor ad-Deen hearkened to the fair Persian with a smile, and when she had done, "My charmer," said he, with the same air of gaiety, "say no more of that. Let us talk of nothing but mirth and pleasure. In my father's lifetime I was always under restraint, and I am now resolved to enjoy the liberty I so much sighed for before his death. It will be time enough for me hereafter to think of leading the sober, regular life you talk of, and a man of my age ought to taste the pleasures of youth." What contributed still more to the ruin of Noor ad-Deen's fortune was his unwillingness to reckon with his steward, for whenever he brought in his accounts he still sent him away without examining them. "Go, go," he said, "I trust wholly to your honesty. Only take care to provide good entertainments for my friends." "You are the master, sir," replied he, "and I but the steward. However, you would do well to think upon the proverb, 'He that spends much, and has but little, must at last insensibly be reduced to poverty.' You are not contented with keeping an extravagant table, but you must lavish away your estate with both hands, and were your coffers as large as mountains, they would not be sufficient to maintain you." "Begone!" replied Noor ad-Deen, "I want not your grave lessons. Only take care to provide good eating and drinking, and trouble your head no further about the rest." In the meantime Noor ad-Deen's friends were constant guests at his table, and never failed to take advantage of the easiness of his temper. They praised and flattered him, extolling his most indifferent actions, but above all they took particular care to commend whatever belonged to him, and in this they found their account. "Sir," said one of them, "I came the other day by your estate that lies in such a place. Nothing can be so magnificent or so handsomely furnished as your house, and the garden belonging to it is a paradise upon earth." "I am very glad it pleases you," replied Noor ad-Deen. "Bring me pen, ink, and paper. Without more words, it is at your service. I make you a present of it." No sooner had others commended one of his houses, baths, or public buildings, erected for the use of strangers, the yearly revenue of which was very considerable, than he immediately gave them away. The fair Persian could not forbear stating to him how much injury he did himself, but instead of paying any regard to her remonstrances, he continued his extravagances, and the first opportunity that offered, squandered away the little he had left. In short, Noor ad-Deen did nothing for a whole year but feast and make merry, wasting and consuming with the utmost prodigality the great wealth that his predecessors and the good vizier his father had with so much pains and care acquired and preserved. The year was but just expired when a person one day knocked at the door of the hall, where he and his friends were at dinner together by themselves, having sent away the slaves that they might enjoy the greater liberty. One of his friends offered to rise, but Noor ad-Deen, stepping before him, opened the door himself. It was the steward, and Noor ad-Deen, going a little out of the hall to know his business, left the door half open. The friend that offered to rise from his seat, seeing it was the steward, and being curious to know what he had to say, placed himself between the hangings and the door, where he plainly overheard the steward's discourse to his master. "Sir," said he, "I ask 1,000 pardons for coming to disturb you in the height of your pleasure, but what I have to say is of such importance that I thought myself bound in duty to acquaint you with it. I come, sir, to make up my last accounts, and to tell you that what I all along foresaw, and have warned you of, is at last come to pass. I have not the smallest piece left of all the sums I have received from you for your expenses, and the other funds you assigned me are all exhausted. The farmers and those that owe you rent have made it so plainly appear to me that you have assigned over to others what they held of you, that it is impossible for me to get any more from them on your account. Here are my books, if you please examine them, and if you wish I should continue useful to you, assign me other funds, or else give me leave to quit your service." Noor ad-Deen was so astonished at his statement that he gave him no answer. The friend who had been listening all this while, and had heard every syllable of what the steward said, immediately came in and told the company what he had overheard. "It is your business, gentlemen," said he, "to make your use of this caution. For my part, I declare to you, this is the last visit I design ever to make Noor ad-Deen." "Nay," replied they, "if matters go thus, we have as little business here as you, and for the future shall take care not to trouble him with our company." Noor ad-Deen returned presently after. Notwithstanding all his efforts to appear gay to his guests, he could not so dissemble his concern, but they plainly perceived the truth of what they had heard. He was scarcely sat down in his place when one of his friends arose. "Sir," said he, "I am sorry I cannot have the honour of keeping your company any longer, and therefore I hope you will excuse my rudeness in leaving you so soon." "What urgent affair," demanded Noor ad-Deen, "obliges you to be going so soon?" "My wife, sir," he replied, "is brought to bed to-day, and upon such an occasion you know a husband's company is always necessary." So, making a very low bow, he went away. A minute afterwards a second took his leave, with another excuse. The rest did the same, one after another, till at last not one of the 10 friends that had hitherto kept Noor ad-Deen company remained. End of section 32. Recording by Nicole.